the day the mountain exploded. The Mount St. Helens eruption, May 18, 1980. Read by a historic official. There are mornings that come in silence. Mornings that arrive like any other, with birdsong, with pale gold light stretching over the ridgeline, with the ordinary rhythm of people waking to ordinary lives. This was one of those mornings. And then it was not. The mountain had stood there for centuries, longer than memory, longer than language. It rose from the earth with such permanence, such authority, that the villages in its shadow had stopped seeing it long ago. The way we stop seeing the walls of our own rooms, the way we forget the sky until the day falls. In the valleys below, farmers had already bent their backs to the soil. Children had already spilled from doorways into the morning air. Smoke curled from chimneys into a sky, so blue, and still it looked painted. It was a kind of day that asks nothing of you, the kind of day you never think to remember. But the earth always has its own calendar. To understand what happened, you must first understand what the mountain was. Not merely a geological formation, not merely an elevation of rock and ice. The mountain was a marker of the world. It was the place where the sky touched the land. Indigenous peoples who had lived in its shadow for 10,000 years had called it by names that meant the breathing one, the sleeper, the keeper of fire. They had known, in the way that people who listen to the earth always know. For centuries, it had slept. It gave off warmth in certain seasons, a slight trembling in the bones of the valley floor, wisps of steam that rose from its summit like the breath of something enormous dreaming. Scientists had monitored it. Geologists had mapped its chambers and its ancient flows of cooled stone. Reports had been written. Warnings had been issued. And then, as warnings often do, they had quietly receded into background noise of daily life. The towns closest to the mountain had populations in the thousands. Logging camps, farms, a lake of extraordinary clarity, fed by glacial melt, where people fished in summer and watched the reflection of the mountain in winter. There were roads. There were schools. There were diners where people ordered eggs over easy and argued about baseball. Life, in all its stubbornly ordinary beauty, pressed right up against the edge of geological time. And geological time had been waiting. In the weeks before the eruption, the mountain began to speak. Small earthquakes, dozens of them, then hundreds shivered through the ground. Not the dramatic convulsions of disaster films, but subtle, persistent tremors, like the fidgeting of something enormous that has been still for too long. Instruments recorded them. Scientists gathered at their monitors with furrowed brows and careful language, and the particular anxiety of people who understand the system too well to be comforted by it. The north face of the mountain began to bulge, a slow, almost imperceptible swelling, like a breath being drawn but never released. Each day it grew by feet, then by yards. Magma, liquid rock, ancestral fire, was pushing upward through channels formed millions of years before the first human I ever beheld this place. The mountain was filling. It was becoming something it could no longer contain. Evacuation orders were issued. Some people left. Some refused. There are always those who refuse. Perhaps because they had watched so many sunsets from their front porches that they could not imagine the porch gone. Perhaps because the land was theirs, and land, you feel, will protect what it loves. Perhaps because catastrophe always seems most possible when it is not happening, and once the danger is real and present, the mind performs its oldest trick, insisting that normalcy will prevail. An old man named Harry set up camp on the ridge above his lodge and told reporters he had no intention of leaving. He had lived in the mountain's shadow for decades. The mountain, he said, was his neighbor. His old friend would not betray him. It is difficult now to hear those words without the weight of what came next. The air changed. Those who remained noticed it. A smell metallic, ancient, like a door open onto something vast and underground. Birds grew still. Elk moved down from the high timber in long, silent columns. The lake, that mirror of glacial water, began to steam along its edges. Even the insects went quiet. The living world was doing what it always does in the shadow of catastrophe. It was listening. May 18th, 1980. Mount St. Helens, Washington State, United States of America. At 8:32 in the morning, the mountain ended its silence. The The north face gave way first, not in the slow theatrical manner of disaster, but instantaneously, a lateral blast of such velocity, such violence, that it outran every human instinct to process it. The entire northern flank of the mountain, 1 1/3 cubic miles of rock, collapsed in a single catastrophic moment. It was the largest landslide ever recorded in human history, and what the collapsing rock revealed beneath it, what had been building in those hidden chambers for 2 months, for 200 years, for 2,000, erupted outward at the speed of a hurricane. The blast moved at 300 miles an hour. It leveled ancient forests, trees 10 feet in diameter, standing for 500 years, as if they were matchsticks scattered by a child's hand. 57,000 acres of forest fell in moments, every trunk pointing away from the blast like compass needles, all oriented toward a single impossible truth. At 8:32 in the morning, the mountain ended its silence. The north face gave way first, not in the slow theatrical manner of disaster, but instantaneously, a lateral blast of such velocity, such violence, that it outran every human instinct to process it. The entire northern flank of the mountain, 1 1/3 cubic miles of rock, collapsed in a single catastrophic moment. It was the largest landslide ever recorded in human history, and what the collapsing rock revealed beneath it, what had been building in those hidden chambers for 2 months, for 200 years, for 2,000, erupted outward at the speed of a hurricane. The blast moved at 300 miles an hour. It leveled ancient forests, trees 10 feet in diameter, standing for 500 years, as if they were matchsticks scattered by a child's hand. 57,000 acres of forest fell in moments, every trunk pointing away from the blast like compass needles, all oriented toward a single impossible truth. The heat was extraordinary. 480 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to ignite wood. Hot enough to turn snow to steam before it could run. Hot enough to reshape the landscape in minutes in ways that rivers take 10,000 years to accomplish. A column of ash and gas roared upward into the stratosphere, 60,000 feet into the sky, a dark tower visible from hundreds of miles away. It reached a height where commercial aircraft fly and kept going. The sky turned the color of nothing, of erasure, of a world being rewritten from the ground up. Spirit Lake, that mirror of glacial perfection, was buried under hundreds of feet of debris. Its surface rose by 200 feet in a matter of minutes, driven by the landslide that swept down into it. The trees that stood on its shores were stripped bare and carried along, a ghost forest of logs that would float on its surface for decades. And then the ash fell. It moved east on the wind in a plume stretching 1,000 miles. It darkened the noon sky over cities and towns across 3 states. People who woke that morning to blue skies watched the light die in the middle of the day. Ash fell like gray snow, on cars, on crops, on windowsills, and the world took on the quality of an old photograph of itself, drained of color, stilled, as though time itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. When it was over, when the mountain was done with what it had to do, the silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of annihilation. 57 people were dead, among them volcanologist David Johnston, who had been monitoring the mountain from an observation post 6 miles away. His final radio transmission, 3 words: Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it, was the last voice from the edge of the blast zone. He was 29 years old. He had devoted his brief life to understanding the very force that took it. Harry, the old man who had refused to leave his lodge, was gone. His body was never found. The landscape in the blast zone was unrecognizable. 330 square miles of forest had been incinerated or buried. The summit of the mountain had dropped by more than 1,300 feet. Where there had been a graceful cone rising above the tree line, there was now a jagged, hollow crater, a wound in the earth, still smoking, still steaming, still exhaling the heat of the interior world. Animals died by the thousands. Rivers ran gray with ash and debris. Fish choked in water turned acidic and cold by volcanic runoff. The Toutle River, a clear-running trout stream, became a torrent of mud 30 feet deep, swallowing bridges and roads, and the evidence that human beings had ever settled these banks. And yet, within weeks, something unexpected began to happen in the blast zone, in the gray, apparently lifeless expanse of ash and fallen timber, life stirred. Gophers had survived underground, and they began to push soil to the surface, creating tiny islands of earth. Prairie lupin, a stubborn nitrogen-fixing plant, found purchase in the cinders. Elk returned, drawn by minerals in the volcanic soil. Insects arrived on the wind. Birds followed the insects. The mountain had destroyed a forest 5 centuries old, and it had also, in its violent way, prepared the ground for something new. In the years that followed, Mount St. Helens became the most intensively studied volcano on Earth. Volcanologists came from every country. The data gathered in the blast zone rewrote textbooks. The pattern of the lateral blast, previously theoretical, was now documented in terrible, definitive detail. Every eruption studied after 1980 was studied to the lens of what the mountain had taught. The forest grew back, not quickly, not in any human sense of quickly, but steadily, with the indifferent patience of biological time. Today, 40 years on, young trees stand where the old ones fell. Some of the fallen trunks remain, too massive to have fully decomposed, slowly returning to the soil that made them. They will take another century, perhaps 2. Spirit Lake is clear again, clear and blue and cold, ringed now by new-growth forest that does not yet know how to be old. The log mat on its surface has dwindled over the decades, the wood softening, sinking, becoming the lake bed of some future era. The lake remains a monument, not to destruction, but to persistence. The crater has been sealed, mostly, by a lava dome that built up in the years following the eruption. The mountain is quieter now, though not silent. It breathes still. It trembles occasionally. In 2004, it erupted again, gently, by its own previous standards, and campanologists watch with the calm attention of those who no longer need reminding of what the mountain is capable of. In the towns that rebuilt, in the valleys that were replanted, in the families that lost what they could not replace, something more complicated than recovery took hold. Not forgetting, not grief, exactly. Something closer to particular human capacity for continuing to love a place that has hurt you, for understanding that the earth does not belong to us, that we are its tenants and its witnesses, and that some forces exist entirely outside the boundaries of our permission. There is a photograph taken from the air shortly after the eruption. In it, the blast zone stretches the horizon, gray, lunar, stripped of everything that had made it familiar. And at the center of the frame, in the midst of all that devastation, a single structure stands. A farmhouse, surrounded on all sides by ash and ruin. It sits intact by some improbable accident of wind and geography, its white walls bright against the gray world. Nobody lived there anymore, but it stood. We are, all of us, that farmhouse. We build in the shadow of forces we cannot control. We plant gardens on the slopes of what might, one day, destroy us. We name our children and call our neighbors and argue about small things and love our coffee and watch our sunsets and live with the extraordinary confidence of people who have decided, in the face of all evidence, that today will not be the day. And usually we are right, and occasionally we are not. The mountain taught us something that we have perhaps always known and need to be reminded of, that the world is older than we are, and that it was not made for our comfort. The stone beneath our feet was here before the first human word was ever spoken. The fire at the center of the earth will be burning long after the last human voice has gone quiet. We are guests here, brief, passionate, meaning-making guests, who build our lodges on the slopes and call mountain our neighbor and forget, in our happiest moments, that the earth has its own calendar. But forgetting is not the same as being wrong to build. Forgetting is part of how we live. It is what allows us to love a place, to root ourselves in it, to tend a garden or raise a child or write our name on a wall. The alternative, to hold the geological always in mind, would make us ghosts before we die. The 57 who perished on that May morning did not die because they were foolish. They died because they were human, because they had looked at the mountain for so many years that it had become part of the furniture of their world, because the heart, which is not a geological instrument, had claimed the mountain as its own. Harry's lodge is gone. The trees he watched from his window are gone. The ridge where he set up his defiant camp is buried under hundreds of feet of volcanic debris. But his refusal, his stubborn, impractical, deeply human refusal to abandon what he loved is still here. It is here in every story told about him. It is here in every person who has ever stood before something enormous and said, "This is mine. I am not leaving." The crater at the summit of Mount St. Helens is visible from miles away. It is a scar, and it is a window, a place where the interior of the earth is exposed, where the membrane between the world we inhabit and the world beneath has been torn open and left that way. You can stand at the rim and look down into it and feel the heat rising and understand in your body rather than your mind that the planet is alive, that it has always been alive, that its life and ours occupy the same space but not the same time scale. And perhaps that is a gift the mountain left behind, wrapped in ash and fire and the grief of 57 losses, the gift of scale, the reminder that we are small and brief and luminous, that our days are numbered and therefore precious, that the ordinary morning, the bird song, the pale gold light, the coffee going cold on the windowsill, is not something to be taken as background. It is the whole point. The mountain is still there, quieter now, watching, waiting perhaps, in that way that only geological time can wait, without impatience, without malice, without any awareness of us at all. And below it, in the recovering forest, in the blue cold lake, and the rebuilt towns, human beings are living their ordinary lives, watching their sunsets, loving their neighbors, forgetting again, in the way we must always eventually forget, that the ground beneath them holds fire. They are not wrong to forget. They are not wrong to stay. To stay is human. To love a place that might destroy you. That is the oldest story we know how to tell. The mountain waits, and we, in its shadow, live. Some places on this earth do not allow us the comfort of certainty. They ask us instead for something harder. The willingness to remain, to build, to love, in full knowledge of impermanence. To be the farmhouse in the ash field, intact for now, white against the gray, and to call that enough, to call that everything.